Hi, Ablorde, co-founder and CEO of 4Degrees, relationship intelligence system built for relationship-driven industries.
Ablorde, thank you so much for finding time to be with us on the Avi podcast today. Super excited about this conversation. Can you tell us a little bit more about your background? Where professionally, what was your career path, and as far as the current company, twofold questions as far as what problem are you guys solving with your products and services?
Yeah, so my professional journey, so coming out of college, I jumped into the world of management consulting. So I worked at a large company called Bain and Company that typically worked with Fortune 500 organizations, helping them with everything from kind of growth strategy to performance improvement, organization redesign. And so spent 3 years in the Los Angeles office, learned a ton about kind of overall kind of business practice and how kind of large strategic decisions were made. And then made the shift from there to working with the very opposite kind of company. So small, fast growing, early stage businesses as an investor. So I joined a venture capital fund called Pritzker Group based here in Chicago. I was on the investment team for 3 years, got a chance to work with a bunch of great companies. And what fundamentally kind of underpinned those two experiences was just how critical the relationship network of the firm was to each one of those roles. So in consulting, partners' capability of selling to a Fortune 500 executive was underpinned by how well they managed that relationship network. And then in investing, our ability to find interesting companies to invest in, to do diligence on them properly, and then also to help those companies was also underpinned by the relationship network that we had. And so we saw an opportunity to build products that actually were oriented around how organizations managed and leveraged that. And so that dovetailed into what I do today, which is today I run a company alongside my co-founder called 4Degrees, which is a relationship intelligence and management system built for heavily relationship-driven industries. And so the problem that we solve is for these organizations where relationships are their most important asset, giving them a set of tools that help them understand who their teammates are connected to, how well, what's happening with those people in the world that suggest an opportunity to work together, and also being able to build out workflows for how you can ultimately keep those relationships strong and drive them into business value over time.
Oh, that's very interesting. And I want to dive a little bit more into the whole concept of relationship management, because the first things that come to my mind is, um, you know, relationships matter in everything. It's a contact sport. It's all about relationships, getting through the door, and then proving yourself in what you know. And can you expand a little bit further on the whole concept of relationship management? And in your previous response, you've mentioned something, industries that are more relationship management driven than others. I'm curious, what are those particular industries and what makes them unique in the sense of that relationship management concept?
Sure. So the industries we tend to work most closely with tend to be in the professional services world. So think consulting firms, think investment banks, think also investment funds, so like private equity and venture capital. And what's important to understand about these industries is that the relationships that they care about tend to be really long one relationships that don't always directly translate into or result in a transaction. So as an example, if you are a consulting firm, you may end up getting a lot of your business through referral networks. So if you are a management consulting firm, you may learn about clients from lawyers or accountants or others that work with like these trusted like executives. And the challenge is those relationships are important to you. They may last for decades, but they will never themselves turn into an opportunity to sell. You may not be trying to sell to that lawyer or that accountant. And most systems that are built today and are kind of thought of as customer relationship management systems are built for that linear transaction process. And so that lawyer, that accountant, the like, don't neatly fit into that paradigm. And so oftentimes organizations like that try to essentially build out stopgaps to better capture those groups of people. Unfortunately, those stopgaps tend to be incredibly manual and lack real intelligence and workflows around them. So I'm talking about things like Excel spreadsheets or Google Sheets or Airtables for folks who are slightly more technologically sophisticated. For others, they might use their Outlook contacts or Google contacts to try to house this. And really the challenge is that that data goes stale the moment you put them in the spreadsheet. They don't really understand what it is that you're trying to accomplish with those. And so they just end up being essentially these repositories of information. And so we saw an opportunity for the industries where this truly mattered, to kind of take that and level it up to a very different dimension. And we think technology can serve some pretty important roles in that process. So everything from automatically tracking the people on that network, helping you build out reminders to re-engage them over time, picking up what's happening in the world about them, and other kind of mechanisms to make those relationships real.
Well, very interesting. Little background story on the Ivy podcast is, equally during my time at Harvard, one of my professors, him and I spent some time talking about, connecting with the people that you look up to, or people that you consider as a mentor, or people that you want to surround yourself with. And one of the things that he mentioned to me is, hey, I have a podcast, and I actually use that as, a very simple and, a very effective tool to connect with the people that I want to connect. So it kind of started out as an experiment for me, just going through the rounds and interviewing my friends and, whoever my colleagues. And then it kind of like it took a life on its own, because our main company, we're in software development in high tech space. But the podcast, Ivy Podcast, almost blossomed into a company on its own, where it now gives me an opportunity to almost build these relationships, like through conversations like this. And you've mentioned consulting, professional services, and for us in software development as well, it's almost a very similar concept of that relationship management, because at the end of the day, it's all, that whole client provider vendor is seems to be a little bit more outdated, versus really focusing on more of a meaningful relationship and partnership that then translates to something more meaningful. So that's pretty interesting what you're talking about.
Absolutely. I mean, the way I think of it is, in the professional services, you're not selling widgets. We are rather selling like expertise and trust and kind of capability of follow through. And so those require a relationship, or at least someone else who can transfer trust and transfer that relationship onwards. And so that capability of making sure that you've actually invested in that relationship, I think is what differentiates people who do really well in industries like software development and other forms of consulting versus others who tend to struggle.
1000%. Yeah, you nailed it on the head with trust. That's the key. And that, I think that's a ingredient for success in any type of, business you're trying to transact. Um, when we talk about relationship management, why do you think that needs to change? What motivated you to start that company? And furthermore, how can technology solve some of those issues? The reason I ask is because through my company, we provide services through technology, whether that's custom development or the the resources that we staff on particular projects. So I'm curious to get your take on that relationship between relationship management issues and how technology solves for that.
Yeah, I guess the way I think of relationship management issues today is they tend to be threefold. The first is a lot of relationship management today is either in manual formats or in either in manual formats or in people's heads, right? And so we kind of trust our capabilities to try to remember all the people that are important and all the context about them. When we realize that doesn't actually work, we're then stuck with trying to use systems that are what I would kind of describe as like general purpose productivity tools. So it's going to be Word, Excel, the like, which are phenomenal tools for what they are, but just aren't kind of oriented to this. And so part of it is, the tools themselves that we're trying to utilize for the problem aren't built for that. The second is it's a workflow challenge. So how do you actually ingrain the habits and the kind of best practices that enable you to ultimately kind of take this relationship you decided you wanted to invest in and kind of move it to levels that enable you to have both business and personal gain from it. And then the third is how do you identify the opportunities that you aren't necessarily aware of that are happening in the world to engage this person and to make that happen. And I actually think technology can play an important role in all three of those domains. So the first is trying to get rid of a lot of the manual effort and work and take things out of people's heads and into collaborative systems. And so in order to get rid of the manual work around this, you need to leverage technology to do things like plug into communication channels, automatically capture relationships, try to enrich as much information about people and companies as possible. The second around workflow is both a combination of setting like intelligent reminders and alerts to help you stay engaged with these particular people, but also figuring out how best to plug this into someone's kind of digital life. And so having a separate platform for this is great, but oftentimes a lot of people are kind of actively managing these relationships or communicating with these people in email and calendar on their phones. And so you kind of need to meet people where they are in order for this to actually be effective in getting them to use the product. And then the last is that intelligence that I described. So searching the world to help you stay abreast of what's happening with those people. And technology naturally has an important way of kind of accomplishing that, both through plugging into existing APIs with existing services, but also building out kind of products of your own to try to capture relevant information about people.
Right, right, right. No, that's very interesting. And when we talk about, the concept of relationship management, I'm pretty sure, it's continuous evolution, and you guys have to continue to innovate in that space, in order to provide better, more effective solutions for your customers. And all of that boils down to the type of culture that you have within your organization. One of the topics that I'm very passionate about is building and fostering the culture of innovation. And I spent a lot of time talking on this topic with a lot of different executives from Fortune 500 to smaller startups. And it's interesting to hear different takes on their strategies, how to build and foster that culture of innovation. Curious to get your take on that. What are some of the initiatives you have in place that really allow you to build and kind of develop that continuous innovation within the organization as part of your DNA?
Yeah, so a few different processes we run that we think create some value here. The first is we try to give everyone a high level of proximity to the customer. So essentially, every person on our team has a few like customers, or in some cases, many customers who they are in charge of helping manage the relationship with and fielding kind of conversations and responses to and from. And so that gives every person from our QA engineer to our designer to a backend engineer a really good understanding of who our customers are and what they're trying to accomplish with our product, and both the kind of things they're really excited about, but also some of the challenges that they face, which allow people to start to generate their own hypotheses as to where areas of opportunities may lie or new ideas for things we should be building in the product. The second is giving people a lot of opportunities and surfaces to essentially generate opportunities to have that conversation with either leadership or the rest of the organization. So for instance, internally, we use a software product to coordinate called Slack, and we legitimately have a channel in Slack called Feature Ideas. And that is one of our most active channels where people are consistently discussing new ideas that they have for future things we should build and what the pros and cons of those are and things we should get excited about. And so that's one channel for it. We also have a Monday morning meeting every week where we discuss like customer conversations and feedback from the week. That includes other opportunities for people to suggest ideas. And so we create specific venues where those conversations can happen. We also incorporate the full team in the product road mapping process. So essentially once a quarter, we get together collectively and decide what are the key things we're going to try to build for the next quarter. And every person on the team is kind of essentially prompted to say, what are the things that you think it would be a no-brainer for us to build? What are the things you think we should build that have the highest potential outcome in terms of maximizing, some specific objective for the company? And then we get together, kind of look at the tallied results and have conversations about it. And that leads directly to what it is we choose to build. And so we try to give everybody a voice. We try to create a lot of kind of formats for it. We try to reward people for generating really good ideas and seeing those ideas come to fruition. And we try to give them enough customer context to know what things will feel best for them.
Right. I love those examples. And one of the recent books that really inspired me from kind of the culture of innovation is the book called Experimentation Matters, and by Stephen Tomke, and also Experimentation Works. It really focuses on a lot of these case studies of different companies, successful and not successful, building the culture of innovation through experimentation, through really empowering your employees to not only not be able to bring an idea to the table, but also from the top down approach to really empower your teams to, to take on that idea, invest into that further. And if you see that it's working, bring that to the, great expansion and see how that impacts the kind of the bottom line of the organization. So that's very interesting.
Totally.
I understand that you're big on mentorship. You engage in different initiatives when it comes to mentoring others, and I'm very passionate about that particular topic. What's the role of mentorship for you as a leader? What would you tell to your younger self when it comes to mentorship as you were growing through the career path, and what role did that play for you?
Yeah, I honestly think mentorship is one of the most important roles that any leader can play, both internal to their organization and external to it as well. I think about all the people who have helped me skip steps in the process or avoid making kind of terrible mistakes as a result of being able to pass on their life lessons or perspective on different challenges. Like, I'll give you like a very concrete example. My career path is honestly a result directly of mentorship from even peer mentors. I didn't realize management consulting was a career or was a thing when I was in college, until a friend of mine who was a couple levels above me educated me about what it was and how it might fit what it was I was interested in. Similarly, I wasn't aware that venture capital or private equity were professions that people did. I didn't know anyone who did those things, and so it wasn't until people who were, one or two people who were a bit ahead of me in their careers, who I respected and admired and had built personal relationships with, kind of went into those industries and told me more about what they were and what they were trying to accomplish in the world, that kind of led me down that path as well. And so it's been a very direct impression on my own personal life. And so I always try to potentially pay that forward as much as I can. And I think one of the most exciting things, honestly, about building a company is getting an opportunity to not only work with phenomenal people, but in areas where I have learned things that can either help them in specific tactical objectives that they're trying to pursue, or long run career objectives that they see for themselves, as trying to do the best I can, whether individually or through my own network, to help them accelerate that. And so I find that to be one of the most fulfilling portions of my job.
Right, absolutely. And one of the frequent questions that I get on the Avi podcast, especially when I talk to potential guests who will appear on the show, is yes, obviously relationships matter and all of that great stuff, but some of the questions that come up is, kind of why should I participate? What's in it for me as a guest? And one of the immediate kind of the value add and also the responses that I always provide is ability to pay it forward. You obviously, the reason I'm inviting you on the show is because you have some proven expertise. You've built some, thought leadership in particular area, and for you to be able to come in and share that in a very, very short but meaningful conversation, because a good part of our audience are the early stage career professionals, and a lot of questions that we get from them is, hey, whatever the case may be, management consulting, what is that all about? How do I get into this? Or relationship management per se, for them to be able to find out through conversations like this, I think it's pretty impactful from that standpoint.
Absolutely.
Um, as far as kind of some of the trends or ideas that really excite you, something that you are observing currently or researching and looking to potentially invest further, tell us a little bit more about some of the trends that are kind of on your radar, and why do you think those would be the next big things?
Yeah, I mean, maybe unsurprisingly for a company that has AI in the name, I am someone who's incredibly excited by a lot of the advances we've seen in machine learning, and particularly in natural language processing, that I think have the opportunity to kind of fundamentally reshape the way we engage with technology. And so that's everything from kind of OpenAI's most recent advance called GPT-3, which is essentially a natural language like generation engine that can do some relatively impressive stuff, to a number of other different domains where machine learning is kind of consistently kind of redefining the bounds of what we thought was possible with technology. And so we as a company from the very beginning have invested in figuring out how we can leverage natural language processing to make relationship management more straightforward and kind of useful for our customers. One of the primary ways that takes shape is through what we describe as like relationship strength scoring, which looks at the pattern of communication between people and uses that to identify how strongly connected a specific person is to an external person. And so I get really excited about kind of figuring out more and more ways we can take this emerging power of natural language processing and embedding it into how our customers use our product.
Yeah, very cool. I always say that in our circles of the entrepreneurs and founders of different startups, is most of my friends or colleagues in this space, they either in climate, working on different startups in climate, or GPT-3, and it's almost like one or the other, but also there's a lot of opportunities kind of for the synergies. And it's funny that you mentioned some of these trends in this space from advanced technology perspective, and it's exciting. It's exciting times. There's a lot of different developments that are coming out, especially over the current times. So I'm very excited what's coming up next.
Yeah.
um, One of the other topics that I always cover with every guest that I host on the show is hiring strategies, or strategies to build the winning team under you or with you. Because as an executive, I'm pretty sure it's a 24/7 job. It never stops. You are always on the hunt for the winners, for the people to add to your teams. Tell us a little bit more about your strategies to attract the top talent to a company that's maybe not so known, and what are the different creative ways that help you find the right people to join your team.
Yeah. So I guess I first start by kind of looking within and say, I think great people are attracted to work with great people. And so, like, how do I kind of take the existing set of people who are at the company today and continue to work really hard to not only help them continue to grow and develop and achieve their own career ambitions, but also build a really good culture in which they thrive and are excited about coming into work every day, where we all collectively achieve great things together. I think other great people get excited by working with people they really like and appreciate, who are happy and who are smart and who are building something that is meaningful and that is kind of moving rapidly. And so I start there and spend a lot of my time and energy there. From there, I do try to spend a lot of time outwards. And one of my big beliefs is that a lot of the great people who are off doing something else oftentimes aren't on the job market. Like, they are heavily compensated and are generally being kept happy by the people who employ them today. And so we need to find ways to get in front of them and talk to them about what it is that we're doing in a very active fashion. And so honestly, like, directly before this conversation, what I was spending the last 30 minutes doing was exactly that, was spending time trying to identify really talented people and trying to figure out ways to get engaged with them, honestly, through our own product. And once you have that initial conversation, those people may not be ready to move then, because again, their life circumstances may not be kind of conducive to a move, or they may be happy doing what it is they're doing at the moment. But I kind of fundamentally believe that that's similar to you, that relationships matter, and that even if there's opportunity to work today together isn't there, that a year down the line or 6 months down the line that may change. And so I see it as an opportunity to start to get to know someone on a personal level and see if there are ways to help each other in the meantime. And if that turns into a work relationship, then even better. I also try to find ways of telling the stories of what it is that we're doing and building. So whether that's on our own personal blogs or company blogs or kind of social media profiles, telling the stories of our customers and the impact that we're trying to see in the world. I think all of those things put together tend to lead to great candidates choosing to engage with us in some way.
That's great. Those are great strategies. And at the end of the day, it's even if that conversation doesn't lead to immediate results, it's always, tapping into their network, because they probably friends and, operate in the similar circles of like-minded people. And for them to introduce the further, I'm pretty sure leads to some type of opportunities as well. And I like what you said in terms of being very vocal about your story, about your kind of what you're going through at the moment, whether that's through social media, through the blogs, or even podcast conversation like this. It's for an executive, yes, it's a time investment, but at the same time, it really opens up a lot of opportunities for people to connect at that level and really see who's in charge, what type of leadership is within the organization, or get at least very slight glimpse into the type of culture within the organization. So that's pretty exciting. I love those ideas and strategies, as far as when it comes to attracting the top talent. When um, from relationship management industry perspective, it's a newer concept to me, and I'm curious, as far as the very niche in demand skills that would make one more successful in this industry than the other, what would that be, and how do you go about finding a person with that type of skill set?
Yeah, so I guess I almost think of it as taking this abstract concept as you described it, which is like relationship management, and then breaking it down into the specific like skills that you kind of feel like you need in order to accomplish that specific role within our organization. And so if I think about the most in-demand skill set for us that we're like consistently needing to work really hard to hire, it tends to be someone who's a combination of like a back-end engineer or a machine learning engineer. So a lot of the work we do, as I was describing before, has like machine learning and AI underpinnings. particularly as it relates to like natural language processing. Those people are one, rare, and two, can be kind of quite competitive and expensive to get into a role, particularly in the early stage companies like ours. And so it takes both a lot of work to identify those people in general. They oftentimes don't have the biggest social kind of footprints and profiles in the world, but then also to convince them to essentially choose to believe in working in this company at the early stages versus taking, a very lucrative salary at Google or Facebook or kind of large company X. And so that goes back to the conversation we were having before of how do you tell an effective story that someone wants to be a part of, and talk about the people they'll get a chance to work with and the impact that they'll have if we're successful. And so those two things definitely wind together in my head.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Um, Ablorde, last but not least, what are you currently reading, and what is one book that you always recommend to others, and why is that?
Yeah, so the book that I'm currently reading is The Wright Brothers. So it is a biography of, well, the Wright brothers and their life story, but also particularly their journey towards kind of being the pioneers of flight. And it really is an interesting story in a lot of ways, in that a group, like, they both just faced a lot of failure, a lot of false ends, or yeah, like a lot of false starts, I should say. A lot of really challenging kind of scientific breakthroughs that they needed to overcome that honestly, a lot of the scientists of the day just completely sent them down wrong paths. And so being able to watch two people persist through difficult challenges to build something that I think a lot of people didn't believe was possible is always, I don't know, something I could take a lot of inspiration from as you go off to go build companies like ours. A book that I always recommend to others is Team of Rivals. So this is another biography of sorts, particularly centered around Abraham Lincoln, but also does kind of mini biographies of a bunch of the other members of his candidates that in a lot of cases were oftentimes political rivals of his. And the thing I really appreciate about the book, one is like Abraham Lincoln's story specifically, I think similar to that of the Wright brothers, someone who didn't really have kind of the canonical background of someone you would expect to be president at that time. So grew up poor and kind of uneducated and a number of other ways of unprivileged in the middle of kind of rural Illinois, and turned out to become the president of the US, and incredibly well-read and kind of a self-made person in a lot of ways. But then second is how he engaged with other people in ways that took folks that should have been his rivals, who should have hated him, should have never wanted to work with him, but who were some of the most talented people in the US, forged them into a team during one of the US's most critical historical periods.
Interesting. Yeah, thanks for those recommendations for our listeners. As always, we'll make the titles and authors of these books available in the episode notes. Ablorde, before we wrap up, how do our listeners find you? How do they connect with you? Where do they find you?
Yeah, so they can find me both on our company's website, so 4Degrees.ai. Me personally, my email address is ablorde at 4Degrees.ai. And then I'm also fairly active on Twitter, so you can find me at Ablordes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Much appreciated. I know you're a very busy guy to go build the relationship management of the world. I appreciate all the insights. Great short conversation, but I personally learned quite a bit. Look forward to staying in touch with you and see how much have changed in the next couple of years so we can do a follow-up episode.
No, looking forward to it. Thank you so much for having me, and looking forward to the next time we speak.
Great.